She always texted me when she was running late. Not because I demanded it or because I was jealous, but because that was who she was. Thoughtful, considerate, almost ritualistic about small reassurances. Even if it was just 5 minutes, my phone would light up with her name and a simple message. Traffic is crazy. Don't let the food get cold. That night, I cooked her favorite meal. Rice, stew simmering low, the kitchen filled with the kind of warmth that made our apartment feel smaller in a good way. I set the table for two without thinking about it, like my hands already knew the shape of our evenings. She had called earlier, her voice light, distracted in that familiar end-of-day way. "I'll be home by 7, she said. "Save me the crunchy parts." At 6:45, I checked the time and smiled to myself. She was punctual in theory, unpredictable in practice. I poured myself water, wiped the counter, adjusted the plates so they were perfectly aligned. At 7 o'clock, I sent a casual text. "Food's ready. No urgency, no fear, just habit." 7:15 came, then 7:30. The food cooled, steam fading into silence. I reheated the stew and checked my phone again. Nothing. I told myself she was caught in traffic, or maybe chatting with a colleague in the parking lot, or standing at a bus stop scrolling through social media. Normal explanations stacked themselves neatly in my head, each one reasonable, each one comforting. At 8, I called her. It rang until voicemail. I didn't leave a message. She hated voicemails. "Just text me," she always said. So I texted again. "Everything okay?" The apartment felt different when the clock crossed 9. Not threatening, just aware. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears when you're waiting for something to happen. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, pretending to watch television while my eyes flicked to the screen every few seconds. No buzz, no light, no her. By 10, the stew sat untouched in the pot, a thin skin forming on top. I turned off the TV. The silence was louder now. I paced from the living room to the bedroom and back again, stopping at the front door like it might open if I stared at it long enough. I checked the lock twice, then a third time as if that somehow mattered. I called her best friend. She hadn't seen her. I called her sister. Straight to voicemail. I called again, feeling silly even as my chest tightened. She's an adult, I told myself. She's allowed to be late. Midnight arrived without ceremony. The digital clock blinked its judgmental numbers, and suddenly every worst-case scenario I'd avoided all evening stepped forward at once. Accidents, breakdowns, wrong places at the wrong time. My phone felt heavier in my hand, like it was full of answers but refusing to give them to me. I texted again, this time without pretending to be calm. "Please call me." I sat at the edge of the bed, shoes still on, jacket folded beside me. I didn't know why I hadn't taken them off. Maybe some part of me believed I'd need to leave at any second. I imagined the sound of her keys, the soft click of the lock, her familiar footsteps. Each passing car outside made my heart jump, only to sink again when it drove past. At 2 in the morning, fear stopped being abstract. It became physical. A tightness behind my ribs, a shallow ache in my breathing. I started making lists in my head. Who to call next, what hospitals were closest, what I would say to the police if I had to. The thought of explaining her absence to strangers felt like a betrayal, like speaking it aloud would make it real. I walked into the kitchen and stood there, staring at the table set for 2. The chairs faced each other like they were still waiting for us. I sat in hers for a moment, just to feel closer to where she should have been. The fabric still smelled faintly of her perfume from earlier that day. That was when the fear sharpened into something colder. At 4, exhaustion settled over me without relief. My phone lay face up on the nightstand, brightness turned all the way up, sound on maximum. I didn't sleep. I just watched the ceiling, counting the seconds between my own breaths. Every so often, I would pick up the phone and unlock it, as if a missed call might appear if I looked hard enough. When dawn finally crept through the curtains, it felt undeserved. The world outside moved on as if nothing had happened. Birds, early traffic, distant voices. I stood by the window, watching the sky lighten, thinking how wrong it was for a new day to begin when the last one hadn't finished properly. I made coffee I didn't drink. I showered without turning on the radio. I checked the driveway from the balcony, my heart pounding before my eyes even focused. Her car was still there, exactly where she always parked it. Relief flared for half a second, then collapsed under its own weight. If the car was here, where was she? I opened the front door, half expecting to find her on the other side, asleep against the frame, keys in her hand. The hallway was empty, just the faint hum of electricity and the smell of someone else's breakfast down the corridor. I leaned against the doorframe longer than necessary, trying to steady myself. She had never done this. Not once. No message. No explanation. Just absence. I closed the door slowly and stood in the middle of the apartment, surrounded by evidence of a life interrupted. Her shoes by the couch. Her scarf draped over the chair. All the small things that said she had intended to come back. I looked at my phone again. Still nothing. And in that quiet, with morning fully awake and my fear now settled into my bones, I realized this wasn't just a late night. Something had gone wrong. Something had pulled her away from the life we shared, from the habits she never broke. I whispered her name into the empty room, not as a call, but as a reminder to myself that she was real, that this was real, that the waiting had only just begun. Morning did not bring clarity. It brought light, and light made everything worse. In the dark, fear had been shapeless, something I could push away by refusing to imagine details. In daylight, it sharpened. It forced me to look. I stood in the living room again, slowly turning in a circle, noticing things I hadn't the night before. Her handbag wasn't on the console table where she always dropped it. Not on the kitchen counter either. That by itself wasn't alarming, she took it everywhere. But paired with the fact that her car was still outside, it felt wrong. She would never leave without her car unless she told me. Never. I went into the bedroom and opened the wardrobe. Her work clothes were there, neatly arranged, but the blue jacket she wore almost every day was missing. The one with the loose button she always meant to fix. I picked up the sleeve of another jacket and felt a strange wave of anger, sharp and misplaced. How could fabric still be warm and meaningless when the person who wore it was gone? I checked the bathroom next. Her toothbrush was dry. Her makeup bag sat untouched. That meant she hadn't come home after midnight like I'd half hoped. That meant the night had ended somewhere else entirely. My chest tightened as I leaned against the sink, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned pale. I went back to the kitchen and noticed something new. On the counter near the stove was a folded piece of paper. Not a note exactly, more like the start of one. 2 lines written in her familiar handwriting. Then nothing. Don't wait up. I'll explain when. The sentence ended there, the pen trail fading into blank paper. My mind raced. Had she planned to leave and changed her mind? Had someone interrupted her? Or had she written this somewhere else and brought it home without finishing it? I read the words again and again, hoping they would rearrange themselves into an answer. They didn't. I called her sister again. This time she picked up. Her voice was groggy, confused. "What do you mean she didn't come home?" she asked. I explained everything, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence followed, heavy and loaded. "She didn't come here," her sister finally said. "She would have told me." I called her office. They said she hadn't shown up for work. That was the moment panic stopped being personal and became official. Missed dinner was one thing. Missed work was another. She loved her job. She hated being late. She hated letting people down. I sat at the dining table, phone pressed to my ear, listening to ringing tones and rehearsing explanations. I didn't want to call the police yet. The idea felt too final, too public. As long as I didn't say it out loud, maybe it wasn't real. Maybe she'd walk through the door any minute, annoyed at the chaos I was creating. I decided to retrace her steps. It felt logical, something I could do instead of spiraling. I grabbed my keys and walked down to the driveway. Her car looked normal. Too normal. No broken glass. No signs of a struggle. I unlocked it and slid into the passenger seat, breathing in the familiar scent of her lotion mixed with old air freshener. The glove compartment held the usual clutter: receipts, napkins, a spare pair of sunglasses. Nothing out of place. The trunk was empty except for a folded reusable bag. I checked under the seats, then the cup holders. That's when I noticed it. Her phone charger was still plugged in. She never went anywhere without her phone, and she never unplugged the charger unless she was taking it with her. I sat there longer than necessary, staring at the dashboard, my mind filling in possibilities I didn't want to consider. If her phone was gone, that meant she'd left the car intentionally. Or someone else had taken her phone and left the car behind. Neither option brought comfort. Back upstairs, I went through the apartment more carefully, not searching like a thief, but like someone reading a story backward, hoping to find the sentence where everything went wrong. In the study, her laptop sat closed on the desk. I opened it, half expecting a password prompt, but it logged in automatically. Her calendar was open. Meetings, deadlines, nothing unusual. No note about leaving early. No reminder that suggested she'd planned to disappear. Her call log was the next thing I checked. Most of the calls were routine: work, her sister, me. But one number appeared multiple times over the past week. No names saved, just digits. I stared at it, memorizing the pattern, feeling a strange mix of jealousy and dread. Why hadn't she mentioned it? Who called their wife repeatedly without introducing themselves? I almost dialed the number, then stopped. I didn't trust my voice. Instead, I wrote it down on a piece of paper, the same one with her unfinished note, and placed it carefully on the table like evidence. As the hours passed, my apartment stopped feeling like home and started feeling like a waiting room. Every sound made me flinch. Every notification that wasn't her felt like an insult. I checked her email next, then her messages on the laptop. Most were mundane. Work threads, group chats, nothing that screamed emergency or escape. Then I saw it. A location notification from 2 nights ago, buried in a system alert I'd almost missed. A ping. Brief. Inaccurate, maybe, but it named a place I recognized instantly. A coastal town we'd visited years ago, early in our marriage. A place we'd sworn to return to someday. My heart sank. Why there? Why now? She hadn't mentioned it in years. I pulled up the map and stared at the dot, imagining her standing there, wherever there was, alone, or not alone. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by how little I actually knew about the person I shared my life with. Not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet, everyday sense that there were corners of her life I'd never seen because I'd never thought to look. By late afternoon, I finally made the call. The police officer on the other end was calm, professional, careful with his words. He asked for details I struggled to provide. What she was wearing, who she'd last spoken to, whether she'd ever disappeared before. Saying no to that last question felt like stating a fact and making a promise at the same time. When the call ended, the apartment felt even emptier. Not because she wasn't there, but because now other people knew she wasn't there. I sat on the couch and stared at the door, waiting for something: relief, answers, even anger. None of it came. All I had were fragments: a missing handbag, a half-written note, a phone that wasn't where it should be, and the growing certainty that whatever had taken her from me hadn't happened by accident. The police called the next morning, but not with answers. With questions. Again. Different voices this time, different phrasing, same hollow feeling. I repeated her routines like scripture, hoping consistency would summon logic. After the call ended, I sat in silence until a knock came at the door. It wasn't the sharp knock of authority. It was hesitant, human. I opened the door to find a man standing just outside the threshold, hands clasped together as if he wasn't sure what to do with them. He looked about my age, maybe a little older, dressed plainly, eyes darting past me into the apartment before settling back on my face. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I don't mean to intrude. I live downstairs. I heard about your wife." The word wife landed oddly in his mouth, familiar and foreign at the same time. I nodded, unsure whether to invite him in. He took the hesitation as permission and stepped forward anyway, stopping just inside the doorway. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I think I saw her the night she didn't come home." Every muscle in my body went tight. "Where?" He swallowed. "Near the corner cafe. Around 8:30. Maybe a little later." "That's not possible," I said automatically. "She would have called me." "I know," he said. "That's why I didn't say anything sooner. I kept telling myself I was mistaken." I gestured for him to sit. He chose the chair closest to the door, like he wanted a quick escape. I stayed standing. I didn't trust my legs. "Tell me exactly what you saw," I said. He took a breath. "She was with someone." The room seemed to tilt. "Who?" "I don't know his name, but I've seen him before. Not here. Around the cafe. They looked familiar." "Familiar how?" Daniel frowned, searching for words. "Like people who'd practiced being strangers in public." I stared at him. The sentence echoed, refusing to settle into something understandable. "What does that mean?" He hesitated. "They weren't affectionate. No holding hands. But they stood close. Too close for coworkers. Too comfortable for chance." I felt something ugly rise in my chest. Suspicion mixed with shame. "Are you saying she was having an affair?" "No," he said quickly. "I don't know. I'm saying it didn't look secretive in the way affairs usually do. It looked careful." He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. They talked for a bit. Then she looked around. Not nervous, just alert. And then she handed him something. "What?" I couldn't see clearly. It was small. He put it in his pocket. My mind raced back to the unfinished note, the missing handbag, the phone that wasn't in the car. Did she look upset? Daniel shook his head. No. Calm. Focused. He paused. She looked like someone who had already made peace with a decision. The words cut deeper than any accusation could have. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because yesterday I saw the police outside," he said quietly. "And because last night, someone slipped a note under my door." My stomach dropped. "What kind of note?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. His hands trembled as he passed it to me. There were no words on it, just an address and a time. "That's where I was supposed to meet her," he said. "But she never showed." I looked at the paper, my mind struggling to catch up. "Why would my wife be meeting you?" Daniel's face flushed. "Because she asked me to help her." "With what?" He looked at the floor. "She said if anything ever happened to her, you'd need to know she wasn't running away." The room went very still. "When did you meet her?" "About a month ago," he said. "At the cafe. She recognized me from somewhere. I used to work with community outreach. We talked. She asked questions. About safety. About disappearing without vanishing." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "She had no reason to." "I don't think she wanted to leave you," he interrupted gently. "I think she was trying to leave something else." Anger flared. "You barely know her." "I know," he said. "But I know fear when I see it. And resolve. She had both." I turned away, pacing the room. Images collided in my head. Her smile at dinner, her unfinished note, the location pinged by the coast. Why didn't she tell me? Daniel was quiet for a moment. "She said you'd try to stop her. Not because you're controlling. Because you love her." The truth of it hit harder than any lie could have. I stopped pacing. "What exactly were you supposed to help her do?" "Connect her with someone," he said. "Someone who could protect her if things went wrong." "Protect her from what?" He hesitated too long. "She didn't tell me everything." I sank into the couch, suddenly exhausted. "Then why do you think she didn't come home?" Daniel met my eyes. "Because something went wrong sooner than she expected." After he left, the apartment felt different again. Not just empty, altered, like a place that had learned a secret it couldn't unlearn. I sat alone, replaying the conversation, hearing her voice in his descriptions, seeing her through someone else's memory. By evening, doubt had woven itself into everything I thought I knew. Had she been planning something behind my back? Had my certainty about us been a comfort or a blindfold? I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel betrayed. But beneath it all was something quieter and more frightening. If she had been protecting me from the truth, then the version of our life I trusted might have been the safest lie she ever told. I waited until night to open her laptop again. Not because the time mattered, but because I needed the world outside to be quiet enough to match what I felt inside. The apartment lights were dim, the kind of lighting we used on evenings when neither of us wanted to talk too much. I sat at her desk, hands resting on the surface where hers had been so many times, and stared at the screen like it might accuse me of something. The laptop hummed softly as it woke. Her wallpaper appeared. A photo from years ago, both of us smiling into the sun, unaware of how temporary moments really were. I swallowed and opened her email, scrolling more deliberately this time, not skimming, not hoping, searching. First, there was nothing. Work threads, newsletters she never read, messages from friends. Then I noticed a folder I hadn't seen before. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't locked. It was just there, named plainly, almost carelessly. Personal. Inside were emails she had archived instead of deleting. Conversations that stretched back months. Some were short. Some were long and carefully written, like she had revised them before sending. None of them were romantic. None of them were casual either. They were precise, measured. They talked about timelines, risks, contingencies, about if things escalate and if I lose contact. I read slowly, my chest tightening with every line. She wasn't planning a new life. She was planning an exit strategy. One email stood out. It was addressed to someone whose name I didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakably hers. Calm on the surface, urgency underneath. She wrote about a mistake she'd made years ago, one she thought she'd buried. She didn't explain the details, but she wrote about consequences resurfacing, about someone who refused to let the past stay past. I leaned back in the chair, the room spinning slightly. All those nights she'd been quiet. All those moments I'd mistaken for exhaustion or distraction. She had been carrying something heavy, and she had done it alone. I clicked through more messages. Some were logistical. Some were personal. In one, she wrote about me, not in confession or apology, but in concern. She described my routines, my stubborn sense of loyalty, my refusal to let go once I believed in something. Reading myself through her words felt like being gently dismantled. She won't understand if I tell him, she wrote. He'll want to fix it. He always does. And this is one thing he can't fix. I covered my mouth with my hand, the weight of that sentence pressing down on me. I had always thought honesty was our strongest trait. I had been wrong. Love had made her careful, and fear had made her silent. I found the photos next. Not many. Screenshots, mostly. Messages from an unknown number. Short, threatening, vague enough to be deniable, specific enough to be terrifying. References to places she'd been, conversations she'd had, choices she'd made years before she ever met me. Someone had been watching her. Someone had decided she owed them something. My hands shook as I scrolled. Anger flared, hot and useless. Not at her. At myself. At the version of me who believed safety was something you earned by being good, by living quietly, by loving sincerely. There was a document saved on the desktop. A letter. My name in the title. I hesitated, heart pounding, then opened it. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't dramatic. It was her voice, steady and intimate, written the way she spoke when she wanted me to listen without interrupting. She explained as much as she could without exposing names or details. She wrote about a choice she'd made long before we met, one that had helped someone she cared about but angered someone else. She thought time had erased it. It hadn't. I tried to make it go away quietly, she wrote. But quiet doesn't always mean safe. She explained why she hadn't told me. Not because she didn't trust me, but because she did. Because she knew I would step in front of whatever was coming without hesitation. She couldn't allow that. I needed you to stay where you were, she wrote. Unreachable. Uninvolved. Tears blurred the screen. I wiped them away and kept reading. She described the plan in broad strokes. Meeting intermediaries. creating distance, making herself harder to track without vanishing completely. The coastal location, the burner phone, the people she hoped would help her keep this contained. And then the line that broke me. If you're reading this, it means I failed to manage the timing. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, her words echoing in the silence. This wasn't betrayal. It wasn't deception born of selfishness. It was sacrifice made without consent. She had decided my safety mattered more than my right to choose. The anger I'd been bracing for never came. In its place was grief, sharp and aching. Grief for the conversations we never had. For the nights she lay beside me carrying secrets too dangerous to share. For the version of our marriage that existed only because she worked so hard to protect it. I stood and walked through the apartment slowly, touching familiar objects with new understanding. The scarf she left behind. The note she didn't finish. They weren't signs of escape. They were evidence of hesitation. Of a woman torn between staying and shielding. By the time I returned to the desk, my hands were steady. I reopened the laptop and read the letter again, not as a warning this time, but as a map. She had left clues. Not for the police. For me. She hadn't disappeared because she wanted to leave her life. She had stepped away because something from her past had finally reached into our present, and she believed facing it alone was the only way to keep me untouched by its consequences. I closed the laptop gently, like I was tucking something precious away. My understanding of her hadn't shattered. It had deepened. Love, I realized, wasn't just about what you share. Sometimes it was about what you carry so the other person doesn't have to. 3 days after she vanished, at exactly 12:37 in the morning, my phone buzzed. I had been awake for hours, lying on the couch fully dressed, lights off, the apartment lit only by the street lamp outside. I knew the sound of every notification by heart, but this one felt different, heavier, intentional. The subject line was simple. If you're reading this. My hands shook as I opened the email. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, to reject whatever explanation waited inside. Another part of me, the part she knew best, needed to read every word, even if it hurt. She didn't start with apologies. She knew better than that. She started with truth. She wrote that she had scheduled the message weeks earlier, adjusting the time again and again, hoping she would never need it. She wrote that if I was reading it, then she hadn't made it home, and that meant events had unfolded faster than she planned. I need you to understand something first, she wrote. Nothing that happened was because I stopped loving you. I loved you so fiercely that it frightened me. I pressed my lips together, forcing myself to keep reading. She explained more than she had in the letter on her laptop. Not names, not places, but motives. Years ago, before me, before our life, she had helped expose something she believed was wrong. At the time, it felt righteous, necessary. She hadn't anticipated the resentment it would leave behind. She hadn't anticipated how long anger could wait. I thought time would make it forget me, she wrote. Instead, it taught it patience. She described the first sign that the past had returned. A message that referenced a memory only she would recognize. Then another. Then a subtle reminder that distance didn't equal safety. She said she tried to handle it quietly, the way she handled everything difficult. Alone, methodical, hoping not to disturb the life she loved. I watched you sleep some nights and felt like a thief, she wrote, because I was stealing your peace to preserve mine. Tears slid down my face, unchecked. I didn't wipe them away. She wrote about the night she didn't come home. How she stood in the kitchen, pen hovering over paper, knowing that if she finished the note, she wouldn't be able to walk out. How she left it incomplete on purpose, giving herself a way to come back if courage failed. It didn't, she wrote, but I needed to believe it could. She confirmed what I had already pieced together. The meeting, the coastal town, the plan to contain the damage without pulling me into it. She admitted she underestimated how quickly control could slip away. I am not in danger as I write this, she wrote, but I am not free yet either. That sentence sat with me for a long time. She told me what she needed from me now. Not rescue, not pursuit, patience. Silence. Trust. She asked me not to chase answers that could place me in someone else's line of sight. She asked me to let the authorities do what they were already doing, and to let her finish what she had started. I know how impossible this sounds, she wrote. I know how it contradicts everything you believe about standing together. But sometimes standing with someone means staying where they can't be reached. I wanted to scream. I wanted to argue with words she would never hear. I wanted to tell her she didn't get to decide this alone. But even as the anger rose, it softened under the weight of recognition. She knew me. She knew exactly how I would feel reading this. And she had written it anyway. Toward the end of the message, her tone shifted. It grew gentler, more intimate, like she was sitting beside me again, legs tucked under herself, voice low so the world couldn't overhear. If this ends the way I hope it will, she wrote, there will be a day when I come back and we talk about all of this honestly. You'll be angry. I'll let you be. You'll ask why I didn't trust you with the truth. I'll tell you that I trusted you too much to risk losing you. And then the line I keep returning to even now. She didn't come home that night because she didn't want me to follow her into the dark. The email ended there. No signature. No timestamp beyond the scheduled send. Just silence. I sat there until morning, phone resting in my open palm. The weight of her words settling into something steadier than panic. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel closure. But for the first time since she disappeared, I felt anchored to the truth instead of floating in fear. In the days that followed, I did exactly what she asked. I cooperated. I waited. I spoke carefully. I learned how to live inside uncertainty without letting it hollow me out. The apartment still feels too quiet sometimes. Her absence still echoes in ordinary moments. In grocery aisles, in empty chairs, in the instinct to reach for my phone. But now that absence has shape and meaning. It isn't abandonment. It's distance with purpose. Every night, before I sleep, I reread her message. Not because I'm afraid of forgetting her voice, but because it reminds me of something essential. Love doesn't always look like holding on. Sometimes it looks like trusting someone enough to let them walk into danger believing they'll find their way back.